For 6 hours, the Iranian flagged Tuska kept moving toward Bandar Abbas, while U.S. warnings kept coming. Then USS Bruins ordered the crew out of the engine room, fired into the ship's propulsion space with its 5-inch gun, and Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit boarded it. That is where this story really starts. Not in a conference room, not in a statement, but with the ship being crippled at sea, while another round of talks is supposed to be taking shape. Iran's answer was not calm language. Mohammad Bagher Kulabov said Tehran would not negotiate under threat and warned that Iran had prepared new cards on the battlefield. That tells you exactly what kind of atmosphere these talks are sitting. Inside, one side is enforcing pressure at sea, the other is answering by making sure nobody believes the field is finished speaking. Stay with me on this, because the part that matters is not the handshakes people are waiting to film. It is the pressure both sides are trying to carry into the room without admitting how much they still need it. Subscribe if you want the real fault line and tell me one thing in the comments. Is Iran trying to buy a better deal or buy one more move before it names the price? On the US side, the message is readiness, not resolution, just readiness. Reuters reported that JD Vance was still in the United States and had not yet departed for Pakistan even as a second round was being lined up. So the American posture is clear enough. We are prepared to move when the room is ready. The problem is that Tehran still seems more interested in shaping the room than entering it cleanly. Islamabad is already behaving like the meeting is real. Police officers are standing guard at checkpoints, traffic is being controlled, and the capital is tightening itself around the possibility of another high-level encounter. When a city starts doing that, the room is no longer theoretical. But a real room does not mean real convergence. It can also mean both sides know the stakes are high enough to perform seriousness while still holding back the one thing that would actually change the balance. And that is the split sitting under the title. The visible American position is movement. The visible Pakistani position is preparation. The invisible Iranian position is the one that matters most, because Iran still has not made the clean, costly disclosure that would tell everyone what it is genuinely prepared to surrender. Right up against the deadline, there was still no official Iranian announcement confirming the move. Dawn reported exactly that. No official announcement from Iran by the time the story went to press. That silence is not filler. It is leverage. When the world is waiting for one sentence, and you still refuse to give it, the refusal itself starts doing strategic work. Tehran has also put a procedural wall in front of the talks. Its position is that more negotiations with Washington cannot happen until both sides agree on a shared framework first. That sounds technical if you hear it too quickly. It is not technical. It is Iran refusing to sit down under a structure that it thinks was built by US coercion and sold to everyone else as diplomacy. That is why reading this as indecision is stupid. A side that feels weak usually tries to reassure. A side that thinks uncertainty is helping usually does the opposite. It withholds, delays, hints, denies, and lets the other side rehearse every possible bad outcome on its own. Even Iranian reporting described the next round as shrouded in uncertainty. That matters because now the ambiguity is not just outside commentary, it is part of Iran's own public environment. Tehran is not merely failing to clear up confusion, it is preserving a condition in which confusion remains useful. And useful confusion is one of the cheapest forms of leverage a state can hold. That contradiction sharpens in a single line. Iran has not confirmed attendance, and instead it is warning about escalation. So the issue is no longer whether Tehran might show up. The issue is that it is trying to keep two forms of leverage alive at once the leverage of absence and the leverage of threat. That is a much stronger position than just saying yes too early and letting the room define you. If you want the cleanest way to say it, here it is. Iran's hand is not a secret weapon hidden in a warehouse. Its hand is the set of pressures it can still carry into the negotiation without naming which one it is ready to give up. That is why the title works. The missing reveal is not attendance, it is price. The first Islamabad round already showed how hard that price fight is going to be. JD Vance led the US delegation through 21 hours of talks in Islamabad and still left without a deal. That alone kills the fantasy that one more round automatically means progress. A 21-hour negotiation that ends in failure does not tell you the breakthrough is close. It tells you the room already found the wall. And those were not symbolic talks. They were described as the highest level direct talks in decades, and they still ended without a breakthrough after a sleepless, tense night. That is not a near miss. That is both sides learning, face to face, how far apart they still are. When the real demands are laid on the table and neither wants to look like the first one to bend, that changes the meaning of round two. It is not the natural next step after healthy momentum. It is the second attempt to solve a dispute that the first room exposed more brutally than it softened. The room did not fail because the delegations lacked access. It failed because each side saw too clearly where the other one thinks surrender begins. Look at the American ask and you see why. Washington wanted Iran to end all uranium enrichment, dismantle major enrichment facilities, and hand over its highly enriched uranium. That is not a minor rollback. That is a demand so deep, it would force Tehran to accept not only limitation, but the public appearance of defeat built into the structure of the deal. And the dispute does not stop at the nuclear file. Arab news reported that disagreement still runs through uranium enrichment and the Strait of Hormuz. That means the fight is also about whether Iran keeps a grip on the most dangerous shipping lever in the region, or whether the United States can strip that leverage away without igniting the very escalation that talks are supposed to prevent. So when people ask what Iran has not shown, the honest answer is this. Iran has not told Washington which source of leverage it is actually ready to lose. Enrichment, Hormuz, timing, attendance, threat sequencing. All of it is still being carried in a half-open hand until one of those fingers comes off the table. The hand is still closed where it counts. Pakistan is the reason this argument keeps happening in a room instead of entirely through threats. Its own foreign ministry says Ishaq Dar and Field Marshal Syed Azam Munir helped mediate several rounds of intense and constructive negotiations. That is not ceremonial hosting. That is Pakistan spending military credibility, diplomatic access, and political capital to keep both sides from deciding that the next move belongs somewhere darker than a negotiating table. That is why the line from Pakistan's side is so revealing. The job now is to make sure both sides believe they are getting an honorable exit. That is the right phrase, because this is not a mediation between two parties who think they are almost aligned. This is a mediation between two parties who need a way out that does not look like humiliation when they go home and explain it. Even the logistics show how much Pakistan is doing to remove excuses. It extended visa-free travel to delegates and journalists from Iran and the United States for the talks. That matters because it strips away procedural friction. If the next round fails, nobody gets to pretend the problem was paperwork, access, or airport nonsense. The problem will be what each side refused to give the other once they were in the same city. Pakistan is also making the commitment explicit at the top level. It says it will remain fully committed to advancing regional peace and security. That sounds polite, but the risk behind it is real. If Islamabad hosts a real breakthrough, Pakistan rises. If it hosts a prolonged performance in which both sides protect leverage while the crisis merely changes shape, Pakistan owns part of the political fallout as well. Pakistan can do a lot. It can close roads, secure hotels, move mediators, pass messages, shrink misunderstandings, and stop the room from collapsing in the first hour. What it cannot do is answer the one hard question. Tehran is still keeping for itself. Which pressure tool is it finally ready to put down, and which ones does it still think are worth carrying? Now comes the part that should make everyone nervous. Reuters reported fears that Hormuz could cap, not advance, a US-Iran settlement. In plain language, the talks could produce something narrow enough to steady shipping and calm markets while leaving the deeper coercive structure intact. That would not be peace in any serious sense. That would be crisis management with a cleaner headline. Dawn put the atmosphere exactly right. Diplomacy is unfolding in parallel with military signaling, not after force, not beyond force, in parallel with it. That means every line spoken in Islamabad is still being distorted by the fact that ships can be intercepted, warnings can be ignored, blockades can tighten, and threats can return to the front of the story faster than any diplomat can rewrite a schedule. This is where shallow coverage gets lost. It sees movement and calls it progress. It sees delegations and calls it commitment. It sees a second round and calls it momentum. But movement can be staging. Commitment can be tactical. Momentum can be nothing more than the shared fear of what happens if talks die too publicly and too fast. That is why the image of checkpoints in Islamabad matters more than it first appears. Those officers are not guarding a peace dividend. They are guarding a narrow chance to keep a live confrontation contained, long enough for the adults in the room to test whether containment can become concession. Security around the venue is the visible proof that everyone understands how much can go wrong if this round collapses under its own mistrust. And Tehran still seems determined to keep mistrust alive as an instrument, not a problem to be solved too quickly. It is not confirmed attendance, and the warning about battlefield cards is still hanging there over the talks. That is how you make the other side negotiate against two shadows at once: the shadow of your empty chair and the shadow of what you might still do if the room turns against you. The strongest way to read this title is not as a travel update, it is as a leverage update. Vance being ready is visible. Pakistan being ready is visible. What is still not visible is what Tehran will actually pay to turn readiness into agreement. That missing payment is the hand. And once you see that, the whole story reorganizes itself. The maritime pressure matters because it tells Tehran what Washington is willing to do while talks are pending. The framework demand matters because it tells Washington that Iran will not walk into a room already shaped as a surrender chamber. The uncertainty matters because uncertainty keeps everyone else leaning forward, guessing, recalculating, waiting for a reveal that Iran still thinks is more valuable, unmade. That is also why the middle of this story is so dangerous. The most destabilizing outcome is not immediate collapse. It is partial success, a deal soft enough to calm the world for a week, hard enough to be sold as a win, but vague enough to let the core leverage survive. That kind of arrangement gives every side a talking point and leaves the underlying argument where it was, unresolved, armed, and waiting for the next crack in the ceasefire. Tehran knows that. Washington knows that. Pakistan almost certainly knows that, which is why the real test in Islamabad is not whether everybody sits down. It is whether anybody gives up something they were using to make the room nervous. So here is the answer. Strip down. Iran's hand is not hidden because nobody can guess what it contains. Iran's hand is hidden because Tehran still has not admitted which pressure it is willing to stop using. Until it names that, the negotiation stays lopsided. One side shows readiness, the other side keeps readiness at arm's length and makes uncertainty do the heavy lifting. If the next round happens, do not get distracted by arrival shots, flags, doors opening, or the choreography people always mistake for substance. Watch the actual price list. Watch enrichment. Watch Hormuz. Watch sequencing. Watch whether Tehran narrows any of the ambiguity it is currently protecting. That will tell you more than the smiles ever will. Because the first honest signal in Islamabad will not be a motorcade pulling up to a hotel. It will be the first thing Iran agrees to lose.